So welcome to the Theological Seminary, and welcome to a series of talks that we're calling Emptiness and Social Action. It's a part of the Thich Nhat Hanh program for engaged Buddhism here at Union. For those of you who don't know, Thich Nhat Hanh is technically an alum of the Union Theological Seminary. He graduated with a degree in '63 from Columbia, but at that time the Columbia Religious Department was Union. So he's on our rolls. But this series is looking at basically the intersection of Buddhism and social justice or social action in the world. And the Thich Nhat Hanh program for engaged Buddhism, there are a few things. One in our series like this, where we're doing public-facing programming that looks at intersections of this kind, around justice and compassion in the world, and also inside of Union, a part of this program is the master's degree, the master's in Buddhism and interreligious engagement. So that's the inside programming that we have, and what that is essentially the focus of the program is on looking at Buddhism through the lens of social justice in a similar way, but also as a part of that thinking, how religious communities engage one another in a world that at this point desperately needs to understand how to do that more effectively. And so that is a part of what we do, but what I want to focus on here is our guest tonight. So I want to welcome Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's giving a talk this evening on government for the people, a Buddhist view of political legitimacy. It really is, all of you know Bhante, but I'll just say some words about it. He is truly a critical scholar in the Buddhist tradition. Bhante is one of the foremost translators of the Pali Suttas into English, as well as the author of extensive commentaries and articles in the tradition. For nearly 20 years, he was the editor of the Buddhist Publication Society, a central figure to making possible our access to Pali language, Buddhist scriptures generally, which I personally am very grateful. In addition to his scholarly pursuits, he remains a leader, an exemplar of socially engaged Buddhism, both in his writings and his actions in the world. He is the founder of Buddhist Global Relief, whose mission is to combat chronic hunger and malnutrition worldwide, as well as one of the founding teachers of the Buddhist Action Coalition. Most importantly, he tirelessly, and I do mean tirelessly, stands and works for the end of suffering for all beings, and never ever lets us forget that the Buddhist compassion is expressed through our just actions in the world. So I would like to thank you for being here and welcome you here and for joining us in speaking tonight.
Is this one better?
Yes.
No cracking sound? Only the inherent cracking sound of my voice. Okay, first I want to thank Greg and the Union Theological Seminary for inviting me to give a talk here this evening. And the topic of the talk, as Greg announced, is government for the people, I think a Buddhist perspective on political legitimation. Was that the way
It was, I don't know if it was legitimation or legitimacy, but somewhere.
Something like that. And what I have to say is that my talk has nothing at all to do with the current impeachment inquiry. And in fact, I believe I came up with this topic even before the famous or infamous Ukraine call came to public attention. Okay, so I'm going to start using as the basis for, let's say, for Buddhist political theory, not the concept of emptiness. And I have to disagree with the use of emptiness, at least from the standpoint of Indian Buddhism, as the basis for Buddhist political and social thought. But rather what I take to be, and what I think the texts demonstrate, is the basis for early and middle period Buddhist social and political thought, is the concept of Dhamma. So I think probably all of you know the Sanskrit word Dhamma or the Pali word. Dhamma. It's a little inconvenient because I have to put this down to type. The word is derived from a root that's the same, a verb, the same verb in Pali and Sanskrit, the verb dharati, or sometimes the causative form is used, dharati, which means to support, to maintain, to uphold. And so Dhamma is taken to be that which upholds, which sustains, which supports. That which supports, you could say, the entire universe in its operation, but also the word Dhamma takes on a moral and social dimension as a kind of transcendent principle of justice, rightness, truth, goodness, and virtue. And this concept of Dhamma is considered the kind of pole star towards which any genuine, legitimate social or political system should aspire, and forms a kind of objective standard against which social and political systems can be judged and evaluated in terms of whether they embody Dhamma or violate the Dhamma, transgress the Dhamma. And in the Buddhist time, the dominant form of political organization was that of monarchy. There were actually two sort of rival systems. One was the monarchy, the other were the smaller tribal republics. But in the Buddhist time, the smaller tribal republics were starting to vanish, to be absorbed into the growing and expanding monarchies. And so one of the themes that the Buddha develops in his teaching is to present a concept of kingship which is guided by the idea of the Dhamma. The Dhamma as the ideal towards which the king should aspire and which he should try to embody in his regime, in the way he rules his realm. I've collected a number of texts, and I'm going to go through these texts. I'm actually going to go through 3 periods of texts, looking at the classical Indian Buddhist concept of the ideal ruler. Then, from that, we're going to jump ahead some 2,000 years to the present age and look at our current political, social, and economic system and see how it stands up against the original ideals laid out in the Buddhist texts. And so I start with the canonical texts, the text from the Pali Canon. And so here Can everybody see the projection from the back? So here we have a text which speaks almost in mystical terms about the effect that a king has on his realm in terms of either the unrighteous king or the righteous king. So the text tells us that when kings are unrighteous, and you can see the word translated unrighteous as Dhamma, that is one who acts contrary to this objective, transcendent principle of goodness, truth, and justice. Then his vassals become unrighteous. When the vassals become unrighteous, the people of the realm become unrighteous. And when people become unrighteous, then this has, in effect, sort of conceived almost in a somewhat magical or mystical way, even upon the functioning of organic or inorganic physical systems. So the sun and moon, the constellations and stars, day and night, months and fortnights, get knocked off course. And when they go off course, the winds blow at random, the deities become upset, and rain, sufficient rain, doesn't fall. Then when sufficient rain doesn't fall, the crops ripen irregularly, and then when people eat deficient crops, then they become short-lived, pallid, weak, and sickly. And then the opposite is the case when kings are righteous. Then not only do all of the people in the realm follow the example of the king and become righteous in turn, and the word for righteous is dhammika, an adjective based on the word dhamma, but again, the effect of the righteousness of the rulers and the people sort of reverberates throughout the entire cosmic order, so that even the cosmic bodies, sun and moon, stars, proceed in the proper order. The seasons change regularly. In fact, we see just the examples of how we're going off course today with the seasons. And then there's sufficient rain, the crops grow abundantly, and people become long-lived, beautiful, strong, and healthy. So this shows the importance of leaders, the king or other leaders, who embody in their characters and in their conduct the principle of Dhamma, a principle, a kind of embodiment of the Dhamma that has a radiant influence throughout the entire country. In order to provide a model for the king, or for kingship, the Buddha developed a new concept of kingship, which he calls the wheel-turning monarch. The wheel is the symbol of authority in ancient Indian political theory. It's kind of circular disc, and this mystical or magical disc appears to a king when he embodies in himself the ideal qualities of kingship, the principles of virtue, of goodness, and of justice. And so the Buddha says that even this wheel-turning monarch, who is the just and righteous king, does not govern his realm without a co-ruler. And the co-ruler for this righteous king, the Buddha says, is Dhamma. So the king, though he might have complete authority in his realm, cannot rule the realm according to his own arbitrary will. But to rule properly, he has to look to a higher standard. That standard is Dhamma. And so the Buddha says that the wheel-turning monarch, relying on the Dhamma, honoring the Dhamma, esteeming and respecting it, and so forth, with the Dhamma as his sovereign, provides dhammika, lawful, right, just protection, shelter, and safety for all in his realm, everyone in his realm, including the birds and the beasts. Then another sutta shows us how a wheel-turning monarch conquers all of the countries in the four quarters. Because the wheel-turning monarch is one who becomes, we could say, a world ruler. But he conquers the world not by force, not by violence, but by the power of goodness, righteousness, and justice. So the way this is depicted sort of in Buddhist legendary imagination is that the king takes his wheel treasure, the symbol of his authority, and sets that wheel rolling. And first it rolls to the east, and then the king follows the wheel, and then all of the opposing kings in the east come to the wheel-turning monarch and say, welcome, they welcome him, and they request the king to command them and to give them advice. And the king does not subjugate them and make them his servants, but rather the king simply instructs them in the 5 precepts: not to kill, to steal, to commit sexual misconduct, to speak falsely, and use intoxicants. And then he tells them that they can continue to enjoy their accustomed enjoyments. And so in this way, the opposing kings in the east submit to the wheel-turning monarch, and the same happens for all of the other quarters, west, north, and south. And so it's by the power of his own virtue, his own goodness, symbolized in the wheel which in the secular realm corresponds to the wheel of Dharma that the Buddha turns in establishing the transcendent, liberating teaching. It's by the virtue of that wheel, the symbol of righteousness, that the wheel-turning monarch becomes a world ruler. And what are the specific duties of the wheel-turning monarch? Here we have a sutta in which the prince, you see, when the wheel-turning monarch sees his hair begin to turn gray, he realizes there's no point for me continuing to rule the kingdom. It's time for me to renounce the kingdom, to go into the forest and become a shramana, an ascetic, a contemplator, to devote his life to spiritual contemplation. And so he passes the burden of rulership on to his son, but the son does not immediately become a wheel-turning monarch. The son has to earn his position as a wheel-turning monarch by following the duty of a wheel-turning monarch, which is the Dhamma of a wheel-turning monarch. And so in this scenario depicted in the sutta, the young prince comes to his father, who is about to retire, and asks, what is the duty of a wheel-turning monarch? And the king replies, and these are important points to bear in mind for when we come to the present day. Relying on the Dhamma, honoring the Dhamma, and so forth, you should provide righteous protection and safety for all in your realm, which we've already seen. Let no crime prevail in your realm. And then this is the important point. Let there be no poverty in your realm. To those who are in need, give wealth. So this is one of the primary duties of a king, to ensure the well-being of his realm. To, if any poverty appears, eliminate that poverty by ensuring that the citizens have sufficient material means of well-being. And then, for his own spiritual guidance, the prince is advised to seek out wise ascetics and Brahmins and ask for their advice about what is good, what is bad, what is blameworthy, what is blameless, and so forth, and you should follow that advice. So that is the duty of the wheel-turning monarch. And it's only when the prince fulfills those criteria, that he eventually, after some period of time, will receive the manifestation of that mystical wheel, which makes him a true wheel turning man. Okay, then another sutta describes, it's a kind of imaginary scene or a legendary scene occurring in the past, when there was a realm which is beset by lawlessness and bandits are plaguing the countryside. And then the king turns to his chaplain and asks for his advice. And the chaplain tells him, if you think that you could get rid of this plague of bandits and robbers by executions and imprisonment, the crime wave would not be properly ended, and crime would just continue to proliferate throughout your realm. But he says that this is the plan that you should follow to eliminate the crime that's plaguing your realm. To those citizens engaged in agriculture, give grain and fodder. To those in trade, give capital. To those in government service, pay proper living wages. And then those people, being intent on their own occupations, will not harm the kingdom. Your revenues will be great, the land will be tranquil, and the people, with joy in their hearts, playing with their children, will dwell in open houses. Okay, so these are some of the duties of the king that are prescribed in the early Buddhist texts. And we also find a list of qualities that the king is expected to embody in his own person, his own character. There's a list of 10 virtues, which are called the 10 royal virtues. Dasa, Raja, Dhamma. Again, we have that word Dhamma in the sense not of the universal, all-encompassing Dhamma, but specific virtues, which are generosity, moral conduct, and inner renunciation, honesty, gentleness, self-control, non-anger, non-violence, patience, and non-opposition to the will of the people. Okay, so this gives us kind of broad view of the concept of kingship, or of Dhamma as a principle of kingship in the text, the canonical text of early Buddhism. And then the question comes, is there any king who has ever embodied those qualities within himself? We don't know this for an exact fact, but there is one king in ancient India who was considered, at least from his edicts, and from his rock edicts and inscriptions and pillar edicts, to have attempted to put these ideals of Buddhist kingship into practice. And this is King Asoka, who, according to the traditional account, began his career as a king by attempting to use forceful conquest of other countries or of other states of India, absorbing them into his own expanding empire, the empire of the state of Magadha. But after conquering a territory called Kalinga, the state of Kalinga, and where thousands of people were slaughtered, the king visited the scene of the conquest and saw the bodies of all of the soldiers and citizens who had been slain lying on the ground. And this caused in him an inner transformation. And so he decided to give up conquest by violence, conquest by force, and instead he turned to the Buddha's teaching and attempted to follow the Buddha's teaching in his administration of the realm. And so I just took a few excerpts from the abundant edicts of King Asoka, which give us some idea of how he tried to implement a reign of Dhamma within his own concrete administration back in the 3rd century, about 150 years after the passing of the Buddha. And so he says that he refers to himself as King Priyadasi. He says he promotes restraint in the killing of harming living beings, proper behavior towards relatives, Brahmins, and ascetics, respect for mother, father, and elders, and so forth. But he says that practicing Dhamma cannot be done by one who is devoid of virtue, and therefore the promotion and growth of virtue is commendable. And to this end, what King Asoka did was to appoint what he calls Dhamma Mahamantras. These are ministers of Dharma, not monastics, but these are lay people who are well trained in the principles of virtue, of goodness, of ethics, who are charged to go throughout the realm and to promote these basic principles of Dhamma throughout the realm. And here by Dhamma, King Ashoka is not promoting exclusively the Buddha's teaching or the path to liberation and Nibbana, because the concept of Dhamma was a shared concept amongst the different Indian spiritual systems of the period. They might have had different ways of interpreting Dhamma, but each one saw their task not to promote a particular religion as such, the way we understand it today, but to try to envision Dhamma in a particular way, and then to promote their understanding of Dhamma. And so the concept of Dhamma was used by Asoka as a unifying principle for his realm, a way to promote goodness, virtue, justice, and righteousness amongst the followers of all the different religious sects in his realm. And he does this by sending these Dhamma ministers throughout the realm. They work with soldiers, chiefs, Brahmins, householders, the poor, the aged, for their welfare and happiness. They work for the proper treatment of prisoners, towards the release of prisoners. Okay, and then Ashoka says that he considers the welfare of all to be my duty. And he says that there is no better work than promoting the welfare of all the people, and whatever efforts I am making is to repay the debt I owe to all beings, to assure their happiness in this life and to attain heaven in the next. Ashoka, when he's speaking to the general population, he never speaks about the attainment of Nibbana, but it's always what he sees as the goal for people in general is to live a virtuous life here and now in this existence and to aim for a temporary heavenly rebirth. Yeah, echoing the words of the Buddha, he says there is no gift like the gift of the Dhamma, but then he says, what is Dhamma? It consists in proper behavior towards servants and employees, respect for mother and father, generosity to friends, companions, and so on, and not to kill living beings. And then he promotes within his realm tolerance and respect amongst the followers of the different religions. He says it is better to honor other religions, for by doing so one's own religion benefits, and so do the other religions. Whoever praises his own religion due to excessive devotion and condemns others only harms his own religion. Okay, I could take other selections, but I think this is sufficient. to get the course. And now, the third example of an Indian Buddhist thinker who advocates a particular ideal of kingship based upon principles of Dhamma is the famous Madhyamaka philosopher Nagarjuna. And this is done not in his most important work, the Mula Madhyamaka Kataka, but in a smaller poetic work called the Ratnavali, which means the precious dollar. I've taken some selections from the translation by Jeffrey Hopkins, but slightly revised. And what's interesting about this work, particularly in relation to the theme of this series of lectures, that Nagarjuna was, the foremost exponent of the teaching of emptiness. And in the opening, early part of the Ratnavali, he presents these rather intricate philosophical arguments. He's writing to a king, by the way. The poem, the Ratnavali, takes the form of an extended letter, a letter of about 30, 40 pages, written for a king in one of the kingships of South India. And in the early part of the Ratnavali, he develops these very intricate Madhyamakan-style arguments against the concept of the self, against the concept of inherent existence, exposing the emptiness of all of all phenomena. But when he comes to the teachings, the practical teachings for the king, he doesn't try to ground them in emptiness at all, but instead he turns to the concept of Dhamma. So he says, here I think this is verse 125, he says, as long as the doctrine, that I put in brackets, of emptiness, which removes the conception of I, of the self, is not understood, then, instead of trying to trouble your mind with understanding emptiness, take heed of the Dharma of giving, ethics, and patience. Then he continues by saying that Dharma is the best policy. The world is displeased by policies of non-Dharma. You should win over the world as a king only by means of Dharma. And then the principles of Dhamma enumerated here are giving, gentle speech, beneficent action, and cooperation or collaboration with others. Okay, then there follow verses on avoiding the use of intoxicants, gambling, lust after women. Then come verses on how to acquire the 32 marks of a great man, that is, of a Buddha. So these verses, Nagarjuna is instructing the king in how to follow the Bodhisattva path to Buddhahood. And so some of the methods that are enjoined are abundantly giving the best food and drink, never doing harm, free of the condemned, reconciling friends who have become divided, speaking pleasant words, following the good advice of others, nursing and curing the sick, speaking true and soft words over a long time, showing respect and serving others, viewing beings with love, free of desire, hate, and delusion. Then come instructions for collecting the requisites of enlightenment, the requisites for enlightenment. These are specifically religious activities, but the king's duties also include benevolent policies towards the citizens, establishing schools and providing for the livelihood of teachers, establishing hostels, parks, dikes, ponds, rest houses, care for the sick, orphans and widows, the lowly and the poor, making medicines freely available, providing extensive care for the persecuted, providing farmers with seeds and sustenance, reducing the tax rate, giving to those in need, beautiful girls well adorned. It's there. But this is ancient India. giving clothes, adornments, and enjoyments to beggars, and so forth. And then inspiring others to generate the altruistic aspiration to enlightenment. And again, with regard to prisoners, free the weaker prisoners after a day or 5 days. And as long as the prisoners are not free, make sure that they are comfortable with food, drink, medicine, clothing, and so forth. Okay, so that should take care of our sort of survey, quick survey of early Buddhist texts on the concept of a legitimate political administration. And the way I could just sum up all of these principles in just 3 items, maybe 4 items. First of all, the ruler, whether a king or come into the present, a statesman in today's political system, must be one who embodies virtue within himself, within herself. Must be a model of virtue. Must inspire virtue in the citizens of the state. Must provide for the welfare of the citizens, the people who live within the boundaries of the realm. And especially one of the core duties emphasized in the teaching on the wheel-turning monarch is to ensure that there is no poverty in the world. So we reduce all of these sayings to these 4 key principles. Inner virtue, inspiring virtue in others, ruling for the welfare of the population, and ensuring that there's no poverty, eliminating poverty within the realm. Okay, now I want to jump ahead some 2,000 years, so maybe not that, maybe that up in the 2nd century, coming to 17th century, 1500 years, to the preamble of the United States Constitution. So now, in our modern world, we do not have, at least I don't think we have a kingship. So there seem to be some moves in that direction. But certainly the United States government was not established as a kingship. And so the Constitution begins with the statement, "We the people." And we also have to admit that at the time that the Constitution was written, the reference of "we the people," what it designated, was considerably more circumscribed than the words "we the people" mean today. It meant white males who own a certain amount of property. But since the Constitution is, in a sense, an evolving document, when we look at it today, we have to give it this broader range of application. But what follows is still critically relevant. So we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure the domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves in our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States. So we could say that this preamble to the US Constitution, written on the other side of the world from the early Buddhist texts, against the background of completely different culture, is still embodying, seeking to embody the principle of Dhamma in the constitution of the country and in the administration of the country that is going to be formed on the basis of this constitution. So we see Dhamma in the ideal of establishing justice, ensuring tranquility, promoting the general welfare, and securing blessings for ourselves here and now, and for future generations. Okay, then, from this I raise the question, in today's context, what does it mean to promote the general welfare? And I see two dimensions, two aspects to promoting the general welfare. The first is to provide all people living within the country's borders with a secure social foundation essential for them to lead lives of dignity and purpose, free from infringements upon or violations of their material and social well-being. And so this will entail certain material goods, freedom from one, sufficient food, clean water and air, affordable and safe housing, comprehensive health care, clean sources of energy, and so forth. And then certain social benefits, education, equitable employment, social equity, gender equality, freedom of belief, freedom of speech, the right to participate in their own governance, freedom from fear of violations of personal liberty, freedom from fear of disproportionate punishment, and so forth. And okay, so one requirement is providing the secure social foundation, which can be seen as the floor on which we stand. But there's also a ceiling to this building that we can't break through without destroying the dwelling in which we're living. And that is the ceiling which is imposed by the boundaries of the Earth's life-sustaining geophysical systems. So that means avoiding such threats to the ecosystems as increased climate change, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, air pollution, toxic water, which is becoming an increasing problem throughout this country in many, many ways, biodiversity loss, and reckless land use changes, such as deforestation. So if we are going to truly live up to the demands implied by this preamble to the Constitution, those are the two general requirements. A solid social foundation to provide for our material and social well-being, yet doing so recognizing the physical constraints of the planet and the need to preserve a vibrant and vital ecosystem, biosystem. So where are we today in regard to those two demands? I don't like to overwhelm people with statistics and bits and pieces of fact. But I collected a number of these facts. I actually collected these about 2 years ago, and I haven't updated them in all respects. But this will serve to show us, I think, if we just take a quick look at some of these facts and statistics, where we are in relation to these two demands: to provide a secure social system and to protect the natural environment. So, as far as the social system, I took a number of facts on inequality and other facts on poverty. So the US, according to this ranking, ranks last among 10 affluent countries in terms of wealth inequality and income inequality. These could be shocking to people. You know, when we think, particularly when we get our patriotic fervor aroused and we chant USA, USA. number one, USA, and then we see these facts. We're at the bottom in terms of the safety net provisions that the country offers to poor families, among the lowest in the opportunities it offers low-income families to rise up from poverty, worst in the share of national wealth going to the top 1%, among 21 countries in a composite index based on poverty, safety net provisions, and income inequality. The US ranked 18th, followed only by Spain, Estonia, and Greece. And the top countries on this index were the Netherlands, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, and Luxembourg. In 2017, the 400 wealthiest Americans own more wealth than the bottom 64% of the entire US population, and America's 10 wealthiest men, all men, who collectively owned more than $633 billion. And just 3 white men owned as much wealth as the bottom half of the US population. Who are those 3 men?
Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
Bill
Gates.
You left out the wealthiest of the 3.
Bezos.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos. So that is inequality, and then poverty. So according to the official poverty measure of 2016, 12.5% of the US population were poor, and nearly 30% were low income, defined as living at less than twice the poverty line. And then using another measure called the supplemental poverty measure, which is said to be in many ways more accurate because it isn't based only on income, but by balancing out the social provisions given by the state with expenditures that are required. 43.5% of the US population, 140 million people, were either poor or low income in 2016. And that includes 34% of white people, 60% of blacks, 65% of Latinos, and 41% of Asians. Yeah, roughly 40% of Americans have taken on debt because of medical issues. Student debt has grown to $1.34 trillion, affecting 44 million people. And 19% of all US households, that's 1 in 5, have zero wealth or negative net worth. That is, the debts are greater than the wealth that they hold. Yet US military policy and programs siphon massive resources away from social needs. And so you can see that the United States, over the last few years, last few decades, has been beset by increasing concentrations of wealth at the top and increasing levels of, widening levels of income inequality and persisting poverty and even increasing levels of poverty among certain segments of the population. And what I found interesting chart, and I don't have any background in economics or politics or even sociology, but just the way I became interested in this after I returned to the United States in 2002 after spending like 20 years in Asia. You know, I expected the United States would be a prospering country in which everybody is enjoying a high standard of living, and all of our social injustices of the past decades had been eliminated. And yet I found the country very, very different from what I had expected. So my curiosity and interest was aroused, and now I have access to all of this information. I didn't have to go to the library and dig into these heavy textbooks, but just you go to Google and you put the facts you're interested in into the search box, and press a button, and then you get all sorts of information. And I started to collect this information to find out what is going on, and then to inquire, why is this happening? So what you can see from this is the chart shows the gap between productivity and the typical worker's compensation, which has increased dramatically since 1979. In 1979, of course, there was some gap between productivity and compensation, but starting about 1979, that gap starts to widen. So the worker productivity rises until it's 252.9% of what it was in 1979. But workers' compensation, and I guess this is an average compensation, increases just 100 to 115.6% of what it was in 1979. So why does this happen? From what I've been able to find out by reading, several factors responsible for this. One is the increasing use of computerization and automation, which made many jobs superfluous. So more people are laid off, particularly low-wage workers are laid off because their work is not necessary. It can all be done by machines, by computers. Another was the globalization of the world economy, so that corporations, US-based corporations, can now shift their base of operations to other countries, poorer countries, where the task is just very mechanical type of labor, but they can pay much lower wages without having to be bothered by regulations, safety regulations for the workers, environmental regulations. And then a third factor probably related to this, is the breaking up and decline of labor unions. It was labor unions which enabled workers to maintain a fairly decent standard of living. And with the breaking up and reduction in the number of workers enrolled in labor unions, and with the weakening of the power of labor unions, the corporations were able to funnel off a much greater share of the profits of their enterprises to themselves, to the shareholders, to the chief executive officers, and to senior management, while paying the workers much lower wages. And so that has led to this situation where we have today a very small number of billionaires and multi-millionaires who have this enormous concentration of wealth, and 43% of the population living in either poverty or close to poverty. And yet, this is something else that I discovered by sort of looking into this situation, that research has shown that countries and societies in which there is greater economic equality, greater income equality, less poverty, are healthier, happier, more cohesive in so many respects compared to those countries in which there's great economic inequality and debilitate, let's say, obscene concentrations of wealth in the hands of a few. And so I did some investigations to find the impacts of inequality. And these facts are based primarily on a very important book published in about 2010 called The Spirit Level by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett. I think it's subtitled, Why Equality is Better for Everyone. And so what they find through their research comparing different criteria for healthy and unhealthy societies, that less equal societies have less stable economies, high levels of income inequality are linked to economic instability, financial crises, and inflation. Inequality increases property crime and violent crime, while a reduction of inequality would lead to a 20% reduction in homicides and a 23% reduction in robberies. Living in an unequal society causes stress and status anxiety, which might damage your health. And in more equal societies, people live longer, are less likely to be mentally ill or obese, and to have lower rates of infant mortality. In more equal societies, there's much greater levels of trust between people, more favorable attitudes of people to each other, and greater levels of happiness, at least according to the reports of people. And then, of course, in more unequal societies, there's a much greater percentage of the population suffers from mental illness. Rates of depression in US states are associated with income inequality. And so I did, again searching the internet to find out what are the countries where people live the longest and where does the US fit into this? And what I found is that on this ranking of countries by the lifespan, the life expectancy at birth for somebody in the United States is placed at 78.7 years between Albania and Chile. And then I just selected a few countries at random just to get some idea. Portugal, the lifespan is longer, 81. Canada, 82. Norway, 82.5. Even Spain, 82.8. Japan, 84. Hong Kong, 84. And I think one of the factors also that causes such a high, a relatively low life expectancy in the United States would be a large number of suicides because of poverty and economic debt and economic destabilization, and also the use of drugs, the use of particularly these opiates. And then there was a CNBC poll, U.S. News and World Report poll of which countries have the best qualities of life. And the countries that emerged are Canada, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Australia, Switzerland, Finland, Netherlands, New Zealand, and Germany. The United States is not there. So we could see that there is, I would say, a tension, a contradiction between the ideals professed in the preamble of our Constitution, the ideals that are promulgated as the guiding ideals of the United States, ideals of freedom, relative equality, justice for all, a happy and healthy way of life for all, a contradiction between the professed ideals and the realities of life on the ground for a significant number of people in this country. And the core malady, the way way I see it, that underlies this contradiction or tension. I'm going to rely on my notes here. This is, as I said, this is not my field of academic study. But the way I've sort of sized it up is the dominance of unregulated or weakly regulated corporate capitalism, which is upheld by neoliberal economic theory, the doctrine of free market fundamentalism, the idea that if the market is left to itself, it will provide a satisfactory standard of living for everybody. And then the drivers of the system in the economic sphere become requests for expanding profits at any cost, for higher dividends for shareholders, for higher returns on financial investments, for increased capital accumulation to be achieved by suppressing wages and benefits for workers, by turning people from full-time work to precarious contract labor, and by weakening or abolishing regulations. And the way the system is maintained is by an interlocking ring, or interlocking network of 3 rings of institutions and relationships that ensure that control over the operations of the system remains in the hands of the privileged power elite, to ensure that their control is so firmly entrenched that it cannot be seriously challenged. So there are 3 rings which are sort of linked together to maintain the system. One is the economic ring, which is the corporate and financial class, the corporate CEOs, financial managers, big investors, billionaires and multi-millionaires. Then there is the political ring, that is the government officials elected and appointed in all 3 branches of government who are expected to comply with the demands of the economic leaders. And then there is the mainstream media, which enables the economic elite to maintain their control over the system by ensuring that voices of dissent are muffled, relegated to the sidelines, so they cannot capture a larger audience. And the internal relations between these 3 components, economic, political, and media, are not symmetrical, but rather the relations are such that those in the center of the economic ring, the corporate and financial elite, are the ones who exercise control and dominance over the other 2 rings, the political and the media. The political through campaign contributions, through lobbying, pressure groups, think tanks, which define acceptable policy positions, and over the media, sometimes through direct control, when big corporations actually own the primary media stations, through access and through advertising. The problem, of course, maybe the Achilles heel in the system, is that we are nominally, still in many respects, a democracy, dependent, the system functions through the votes of the electorate. But we are tending more and more to become what has been called a managed democracy. That is a democracy where true alternatives cannot be expressed or disseminated, but have to be controlled by those with their hands on the reins of power in order to maintain their control over the system. And they use various methods to keep the population in check, including fear of the other, divisions, the stultifying, suppressing the capacity for critical thought and reflection, bolstering the sense of ego, encouraging a culture of consumerism, and so forth. Okay, I have actually a lot of notes, but I don't want to go through all of them. But the question, the challenge we face today, I would say, is how do we change the system, given that the problem is a systemic problem, that it can't simply be changed by voting one party into power over the other. Though I disagree with those who say that it doesn't make any difference which party is in power. I say that there are significant differences between the parties, but when we change from one party to another, it's not a sufficient key to changing the system. Still, I would say that we need some, at the outset, as a temporary measure, some changes in the political system. I've listed a few factors here. One is to reverse that disastrous Citizens United decision, which was made in the year 2010, which gave pretty much free rein to corporate money to control the political system, enabling corporations to make unlimited contributions to funding campaigns, political campaigns. And in my opinion, the best way to enable candidates to function is through an obligatory system of publicly funded elections, so that corporate money and billionaire and millionaire money is entirely removed from the political sphere. A second important measure, particularly critical today, is to stop voter suppression, which was increased particularly after the year 2013 by, again, the Supreme Court decision called Shelby versus Holder, which allows the states, without any check on them, to implement measures that make it more difficult for populations to vote, and those are primarily black populations in the southern states. And interestingly, as I was preparing my notes for this, just before I left my monastery to come here today, I found in the Guardian newspaper, it's starting a series of articles called The Fight to Vote, playing off the word, the right to vote. Okay, and then stopping voter suppression, but on the contrary, doing everything possible to make it easier for people to vote. Having more abundant polling places, more reliable voting machines, allowing same-day registration, making federal election day a national holiday. Why not? We have several other holidays. We could eliminate one of them. Make the election day. It's like the most important day for the direction of the country. And people are working. Sometimes they're forced to work until late at night. They don't have time to go vote. Okay. Abolish the electoral college system. I mean, this is part of the legacy of the 18th century imposed on the country by the property-owning aristocrats who wanted to ensure that the general population was not able to assert their voice too forcefully. And let the presidential election be determined by a popular vote, or if we have to keep the electoral college system, let the state votes be divided proportionally according to the popular vote within each state. It seems, anybody from Iowa here? You're from Iowa? Okay, you won't be heard. But the state of Iowa is the state that determines the future of the country. Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, the three states that are going to make or break a presidential candidate. Isn't that ridiculous? It's a wonderful state. I don't think I've ever been here. why should it play such a momentous role that every presidential candidate has to devote all of their effort to winning over the state of Iowa, or and New Hampshire, anybody from New Hampshire? Nevada? Why do you have to win over Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire in order to have a chance to go on for the presidency? And then another idea would be to have what's called a ranked voting system, so that you vote. It's not where you just vote for one candidate rather than for the others, but you rank the candidates in the order in which you prefer them. I want this is my first choice, this my second choice, this my third choice. And if that is done cumulatively over time, it will have the effect of leading to the emergence of truly effective, decisive third parties. Actually, third party, fourth party, so that we have a multiplicity of voices on the political scene, more responsive to the different interests and inclinations of the population, rather than having a choice, Democrat or Republican. And even within those parties, at least in the Democratic Party, there's quite a variety of perspectives. There used to be several varieties of perspectives within the Republican Party. Perhaps there still are, but they don't come out in the open anymore. Okay, and then to break down the revolving door between industry and political appointments, so that we don't have people from the corporations getting appointed to positions of regulating the agencies that, of heading the agencies that regulate the same corporations for which they worked, and then going from the political appointment back to the corporate world. Just, we call that the revolving door. Okay, so those are what I would call tentative, ameliorative measures. But what is much more fundamental, much more essential eventually, is to, in some way, promote the transition to a different economic system. Because the basic principle that underlies our political system is that money, wealth, confers power. And so when wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, in millionaires and billionaires and big corporations, which pay very low taxes, if they pay taxes at all, political power is concentrated in their hands. And even with changes in the political system, if there is not a fundamental change in the economic system, those who possess the wealth will always find ways to come back and control the political system. So the way to change the system fundamentally is to promote. How this will take place, I cannot say. The change in the economic system, I'm not saying a change to communism or socialism, but to a system in which the major corporations and companies and business enterprises are owned by the workers themselves, not through the vehicle of the state, as in classical state communist systems like in the Soviet Union back in those days. But they're still, in a sense, private companies, but they're owned collectively by the workers within those companies. And this is not my original idea, but this is an idea that has been developing among certain groups of intellectuals. The one who has probably been written most extensively on this is Gar Alperovitz, who together with his friend James Gustav Smith, they've established a kind of consortium called the Next System Project. You can find they have a website with many very insightful articles, schemes and proposals. And so the key, I would say, to instituting a fundamental change in the system will be to change gradually through some kind of process of constructive evolution, the economic system away from corporations which are owned by a few, with a small number of very healthy and powerful shareholders, to a system of worker-owned and worker-directed enterprises in which the benefits, the wealth produced by the corporation, by the enterprises, are shared with reasonable equity amongst the workers themselves. Okay, but to promote such a transformation of the economy, one needs to motivate it with what I would call a moral vision, not just appealing purely to people's narrow economic motives, but to generate and to encourage and to promote a moral vision of a society in which people relate to each other, not through competition, not through exploitation, not through fear and division, but through compassion, concern for one another, and concern to promote the ideal and aspiration of promoting the general well-being of the entire society. If we can do that, we will have a society, a political and economic order which will fulfill the mandate of the preamble of the U.S. Constitution, and which will also be a social order governed by Dhamma in that universal, non-specific sense of a objective principle of righteousness, goodness, truth, and justice. Okay, perhaps that will do as my general presentation. I don't know whether, wow. I guess we take some questions.
Well, I have the mic, so
Yeah.
I'm going to take it. Just two part questions. Can you, first of all, the last part of your statement was expressing what would be our collective values. And so, how do we start to transform our collective values as a country, because it's not there at all?
Actually, that's a very good question. It's something I've pondered. And this is the thought that keeps on occurring to me. We're teaching our children just the educational system. Well, I haven't gone to an elementary school for 75 minus 12, what is it? But are they being taught ethics in elementary school? Are there courses in ethics? Courses in world religions?
No.
If that were done, kids would be getting exposed to good, high, lofty, ethical ideals from young age. Courses in civics, do they have courses in civics anymore? How to be a responsible citizen, one's city, town, state, country?
My generation, I was the last generation.
Your generation.
Yeah, it was in the 60s, you were in school.
Yeah, I'm
civics.
thinking of the kids who are going to school today, elementary school.
No. Very little. So the other part of that question was, can you point to anything more specifically in your Buddhist practice that keeps you from becoming cynical and pessimistic about this? Because that's a major, after a presentation like that too, it seems a tidal wave.
You mean all of the facts that
Yeah, the last
About
hour and a half.
the negative facts about it. I have to say that one thing that's emerging sort of from within, okay, we're not supposed to be sponsoring it or endorsing any candidates or political parties here, but what's been emerging, at least from certain circles within the Democratic Party, is a drift towards the idea that we need a new kind of economy that will work for everybody and with greater standards of justice and also ecological sustainability. I didn't touch on that because that's a big topic within itself. But I try to keep my hope up, even though there's a lot of reason for dark investors, which, I mean, the prospects of avoiding them completely are not very bright. But I believe that it could be, on the one hand, through major systemic crises which dispel the illusions that people have about the benign nature of our current political economy, that the need, the sense will start to emerge from below that we need another system that's going to work for everybody. And as I said, there are people who are sketching the designs for such a system. If you look on the website of the Next System Project, which has involved people like Bill McKibben, Naomi Klein, they've contributed to that. And a lot of people whose names I never knew before, but I just see their papers.
I'm curious why, when you were talking about a new economic system, why you said it didn't have to be called socialism or communism.
I said it would be different from the kind of system that should emerge, should be different from the old state socialism that was the system that dominated in the Soviet Union, where the state becomes the owners of the industries, and the state manages the industries through centralized planning and through their appointed representatives. So if you want to call the system of worker ownership of the industries, the enterprises, you could call it socialism, you could call it that.
Okay.
That's just a matter of the label. But it's different from the Soviet-style socialism, which was, I would say, was not true socialism.
No, it wasn't,
But
yeah.
state socialism or even state capitalism.
Great, thank you.
You know, another useful book, actually the two books that helped to inform my thinking on this. One is Gar Alperovitz. Should I type his name? I think it's called What Then Shall We Do? Notes Towards the Next American Revolution. And the other is by Richard Wolff, called Democracy at Work.
So I just left a 15-year corporate media career, and I just left, and I came to Union for a degree in Buddhism. And I think one thing that struck me that aligned with what you said was about how the sort of the money, the corporate money controls these other two circles. Because what I found was that a lot of the decisions that were being made that had unethical consequences were being made in sort of an amoral way. It wasn't the questions that were arising in the corporate media environment between the individuals was not what's the most ethical thing to do. It was what will keep our jobs safe, aka what's most profitable to the company.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, a lot of people can't leave the way I did. They have families, they have, I don't have kids, I don't have a mortgage. I was able to save a little money and bounce, but a lot of people can't. And so how do people in these systems, who are stuck in these systems at the ground level, how do they deal with that, both cope with it, the pressure of it, and how is there a way for them to implement any kind of change, or because I felt trapped, there was no solution for me.
Yeah, this I don't really know myself because I don't have experience in that world at all. But maybe perhaps somebody else has some suggestions. You could reply to that. Is it Jenny? Did you know? Don't think we have to ask me questions, but if somebody has ideas, suggestions, feel free to.
Sure, yeah, I have a background in branding, albeit more on the product side and not on I did work on the corporate side for a bit, which involves more about the ideas behind conceiving products, bringing them to market, marketing them, and putting them in market in a social context. And I can tell you that probably changing the dialogue surrounding that whole process could help in changing the system. It has to do with, talking about the use of a product, the benefits of a product, those kinds of conversations, which were very, very different back in the 70s. And when globalization took off, especially with the deregulation of the market through Reagan, the conversations about bringing a product to market and what purpose does it serve changed. And then everything just funneled its way towards, what's good for the shareholders.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been in some very depressing situations where I just, kind of walk away.
That was really the transitional point, I think, in 1980, 81.
First it was made in Japan, then it was Taiwan, now it's China, and then now it's Cambodia. And I had a question also. It's hard to deal with these catalogs of facts and then trying to think about new systems. So, in terms of applying this in the context of Buddhism and practice, and also being in activism myself, it seems like one of the major causes of this whole wall of problems that we have is greed. Greed is one of the 3 poisons. And so I guess my question is, how can you get, or how can you account for the lack of enthusiasm at large of the Buddhist community to be more involved in counteracting greed? And there's a pervasive avoidance of politics, and so how can you account for that when greed is such the root of a lot of this?
Yeah, that question opens up like a whole can of worms, so to speak. But there's been this tendency, I think, amongst at least a certain segment of the American population that's embraced Buddhism, come from, I would say, a segment which is fairly economically comfortable and not necessarily super wealthy, but fairly well off, so that they don't face the daily struggles of day-to-day living as a personal issue. And so then the practice of Buddhism, particularly advocating just like the practice of bare mindfulness as a way of dwelling comfortably in the present, becomes a way of living peacefully for oneself, but not opening one's mind and one's heart to the actual living conditions of people who live under very, very different conditions. And this was something that, I wrote about this years ago, which got me to some pretty harsh criticism from my fellow Buddhists. But it seemed to me that Buddhism, or American Buddhism, has become, to a great extent, a kind of plaything of an intellectual and cultural elite who can live under fairly comfortable conditions. But I think if we really have a deep understanding of the Buddha's teaching, and not just appropriate certain aspects for ourselves, then we'll see that the task, particularly of dealing with the consequences of greed, hate, and delusion, have to be pursued in a very wide perspective, not just in terms of seeking one's own relative inner subjective well-being.
I just want to say we're at 8, which is when we're formally ending, so these will have to be quick. We said we're ending at 8, so these will just have to be quick. Yeah.
Just that, working in the media, I noticed that the big change was when there was always a separation between editorial and sales. And that boundary was broken. And it rolled all the way across from news to everything else in the media. But it also, it's kind of like a boundary issue in all businesses, changed, with the Milton Friedman thing. This guy invented trickle-down economics.
Yeah.
And it's Bill Gates and all these guys still swearing by it, but it's really destroyed the whole thing. The economic system that existed before. My question is how do you call them on the boundaries?
How do
you create an argument that you have to go back to the boundaries that existed before?
I don't know if that's a job for an economist.
It's kind of a hard thing to do.
I guess the argument would be simply showing that free market economics doesn't really work for the majority of people. I think we just point to the evident facts that it's working for a few. And then there's, of course, there's a middle class, which is fairly well off. But then there's this statistic showed 43% of the US population either low income or in poverty. That's the consequence. And we have more regulated economies are generally more successful than these free market fundamentalist economies. Okay, maybe we can take one more question.
Thank you for your presentation. I hear the orientation toward the U.S. economy and how it functions.
Yeah.
I have visited immigration detainees and know that that number of asylum seekers and detainees continues to increase, not just for this country, but worldwide. To me, that says that nationalism is a problem. So how do you address that issue that somehow the boundaries of a country cause a problem in itself when there's limitation of how many people can get into the country? Does that seem coherent? You look puzzled. I'm asking about nationalism and having national boundaries. In other words, can we have more cooperation with other countries to achieve some of these goals?
Well, what I would say is that, again, this is from what I've read, and that's an area where I have any expertise, but the reason why there's so much migration from Central America towards the United States is because of the political regimes that have been imposed on those countries with strong American support and by the decimation of their economic system, again, through U.S. policies. And now, what I've heard in Honduras, I think it's Honduras, or Guatemala, they're having a lot of problems because of increasing climate change and the long drought, which is forcing many of much of the agrarian population to seek greener pastures by coming to the U.S. Yeah, so of course we have to stop the increase of climate change, but if we had more democratic regimes in those countries, then I don't think we would have the same number of migrants trying to come to the U.S.
I just want to thank you so much for being here and for your talk and for responding to all of our questions. And I want to let everybody know that this is going to continue. So our next speaker on the 21st will be David Gordon on November 21st, and then December 5th will be Shugan Arnold. So please, you're invited to come back, and thank you again, Bhante. So appreciate it.